Squinting through bright days? That's a no. Struggling with glare? Also, no. What about sunglasses over regular glasses? Big no. But prescription sunglasses from Pearl Vision? That's a huge yes. They're a must-have for enjoying the sun in style. Choose from designer frames like Ralph Lauren, Coach, Michael Kors, and more. Arrange an eye exam at pearlvision.ca and get 40% off lenses. Some restrictions and exclusions may apply. See participating stores for details.
Okay, if you dig straight down past the center of the Earth, are you still digging down or up?
Down.
But at some point you're going away from the middle. Back up.
Down. You're heading deeper.
Sure, but at some point you're going up, right?
Gravity says it's down.
Gravity! Dude, you failed science class.
C- is not a fail.
A short phone call can help reduce loneliness. That's why Belle believes that whatever you talk about, just talk.
I'm so glad you called, man. Even if you don't know you're up from down.
It's up.
This week in gaming with Naomi Kyle.
Hello everyone, I'm Naomi Kyle and welcome back to This Week in Gaming. This week we're catching up on the launch of Elden Ring Nightreign, some Zelda movie casting rumors, Call of Duty microtransactions, and the biggest week in gaming is just around the corner, so we have our predictions for Summer Game Fest. We've got all of this week's gaming news. Let's hop right in. A live-action Legend of Zelda movie is in the works, and there are rumors that Nintendo already has an actor in mind to play Princess Zelda. According to movie leaker Daniel PRK, Nintendo is looking at actress Hunter Schafer to play the princess. Hunter Schafer is known for her role in the hit TV series Euphoria. The Legend of Zelda movie will be in theaters on March 26th, 2027. I fully support this casting choice. Let's hope it happens. The online multiplayer shooter Star Wars Battlefront 2 has seen a spike in players recently. Steam's concurrent player count for Battlefront 2 reached 18,600 players, marking an all-time high, nearly 8 years after its release. The reason for the drastic jump in players is largely unknown, but renewed interest in Battlefront has caught the attention of the game's former developers. Mats Helge Holm, who worked on Battlefront 2 as a QA analyst and associate producer, has taken to Reddit to talk about Battlefront 2 and has expressed that he and his former colleagues want to get the gang back together to make a Battlefront 3. Unfortunately, the renewed push to get Battlefront 3 off the ground comes at a tough moment. EA appears to be scaling back rather than expanding, with recent cost-cutting measures impacting several teams this past week, including Cliffhanger Games and its in-development Black Panther title. The Black Panther game was said to be an open-world single-player action-adventure game, but it has currently been shelved. I guess there is a silver lining in all of this, as EA has confirmed that their Iron Man game, Mass Effect 5, and the third in the Jedi saga are currently unaffected by EA's shift away from licensed games. The Elden Ring spin-off title Elden Ring Nightreign looked to be getting off on the wrong foot after receiving 7s, 8s, and 9s from video game critics mere hours before the game's launch. Scores like this for games are perfectly fine, but in this case, Nightreign was falling short of what the average From Software title scores. But then, just an hour after launch, Nightreign had amassed over 300,000 concurrent players on Steam, crushing any previous doubt that Nightreign would be a success. Players are reasonably upset over a new monetization scheme found in Call of Duty. Atop the weapons selection menu, there now sits a small in-game advertisement encouraging players to purchase premium weapons and skins. Gamers have expressed that this sales tactic feels like those free cell phone games from a tiny indie studio begging you for money at every turn. A maneuver like this is barely acceptable from a free-to-play title like Call of Duty Warzone, but these ads have been implemented in full-priced games like Black Ops 6, which sold for a whopping $90 Canadian at launch. We'll of course be discussing this with our guest this week, so stay tuned. Speaking of full-priced games, the online video game news outlet Games Industry interviewed Matthew Handrahan, Kepler Interactive's portfolio director. Kepler Interactive is responsible for developing Clair Obscur Expedition 33, which has enjoyed massive success, thanks to the game being AAA quality at a price point of just $65 Canadian. Mr. Handrahan had this to say: "I think as that AAA price goes up, I think it creates more of an opportunity to be launching more sensibly scoped games and pricing them at that $40 to $50 US range. And I don't think anyone that played Expedition 33 would think that they didn't get their money's worth out of that. I'd love to see more games take this approach. It's tough out there, and gamers deserve a quality experience at a price that is easy on the wallet. If you're one of those people, I recommend checking out one of my favorite games of 2025, Split Fiction. It is a fantastic co-op experience at just $65 Canadian, and even though the game is just 20 hours long, you are guaranteed to get your money's worth. It is so fun.
Quest complete.
So that's the news for this week. It's now time to chat with our guest. Victor Lucas joins us as we gear up for the biggest week in gaming to talk Summer Games Fest predictions, those Zelda movie casting rumors, and how the rising cost of gaming is reshaping the industry.
Select game mode. Multiplayer.
Hi, Victor. How's it going?
It's going great. I'm bracing for a crazy week. There's so much stuff happening this week.
Exact same. Yeah, there's so much going on this week, and the Switch is coming out on the 5th. We have Summer Games Fest this weekend. It's going to be a wild one for gaming.
The Xbox showcase, I think, is going to be huge, and there's rumors also about Nintendo Direct. I think probably related to the Switch 2 launch. And I'm expecting some stealth drops this week, too. I think that there's going to be some big surprise. Might see an Xbox game on the Switch, too. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
That would be wild if that ends up happening. So let's hope for that. Any other stuff that you are expecting or anticipating to happen?
Well, we just got news today that the James Bond game, and I can't even remember what it's called. I've already blanked it out of my mind. But the new James Bond game that IO Interactive is making, they're going to reveal some gameplay of that finally, which I'm very excited about. I've heard that The Witcher 4 is going to be revealing some stuff. I also heard murmurs that there might be a Capcom fighting game, and it might be Marvel or it might be SNK because they've been sort of playing in that space a little bit with the reissues of the classic collections, which are both incredible. Wouldn't you love to see a Marvel versus Capcom 4?
Of course. Yes, please.
I would love to see that. So I'm psyched about that. And I want to see the Perfect Dark, which, it's interesting because Jeff and the Summer Game Fest folks have their play days and they have their event, but Xbox has their own event, but it's all kind of tied into the same. And, I think there's some other ones too, the Indie Darlings or the the Day of the Devs. Comes out at the same time too. So there's going to be reveals all around Summer Game Fest. It feels good to just kind of, I think, bracket it around Summer Game Fest. But I'm expecting huge things out of the Xbox presser as well. They've started to release some of the titles that they were hyping last year, which was one of the best, press events I've ever gone to with all of the reveals they had in 2024. But now we've had Doom: The Dark Ages. They gave us a good glimpse of Perfect Dark last year. We probably, we'll get a release date for that, a release date for Fable. Very psyched about that. Also psyched that Nintendo is going to be a part of Summer Game Fest as well. So they'll probably have hands-on with all like Donkey Kong Bonanza and stuff like that for press at Summer Game Fest on Switch 2. And it's coming in hot, man. You and I, we don't have the Switch 2s yet. It's coming. I can't wait to start playing these games.
I can't wait. I can't wait either. We're definitely going to be putting out some content about the Switch 2, so tune in for that, guys. Tune into our channels. And yeah, I'm excited to get my review out there to talk about just the launch of it and everything because it's finally here.
Yep.
And you're right. This does feel nice. It feels like E3 a little bit. It's starting to feel like that a little bit.
It's scaling up. Yeah. All of the tech from about 4 years ago, 5 years, even like all of this AI upscaling that's been happening, with PSSR and PlayStation 5 Pro and stuff like that. Of course, it's part of the Steam Deck and the DLSS technologies in Nintendo Switch 2. Developers are really getting a handle on that, and all of the companies that offer that have really started to get a handle on that. So we're starting to see like just amazing looking software using the benefits of AI, I guess, kind of post-processing or processing the visual image and then up converting it to 4K. I mean, the fact that the Switch 2 is going to have 4K visuals at 120 frames per second, I think that they're going to have that. At least 60 frames per second. It's just crazy. And so I think what's happening is like all the developers are starting to really get a handle on this tech. And so And it's also the end of the life cycle, really, for the current Xbox and the PlayStation 5. So this is when the fruit starts to ripen a little bit. This is when all the big games start coming out that look amazing.
Good way to put it. I love that. Well, that was just a little taste of what we're going to be talking about today because, there's a lot going on this week in the gaming space for those who are listening. So there's a lot to cover. And of course, Summer Games Fest is just around the corner this weekend. So this is kind of like the pre-show to the show. But we'll be right back here after Games Out this week. We're going to be chatting about some more of the news that went on prior to Summer Games Fest. So stay tuned.
Games Out this week.
June 5th is the official launch of the Nintendo Switch 2, and we've got a lot of games launching with it, like Mario Kart World, Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, Bravely Default Flying Fairy HD Remaster, Yakuza 0 Director's Cut, and Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition, just to name a few. Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma dances onto PC and Nintendo Switch 1 and 2. Deltarune Chapters 3 and 4 team up on PS4, PC, and Nintendo Switch 1 and 2. Then, on June 6th, Dragon is Dead Dodge rolls exclusively onto the PC. PS Plus subscribers can look forward to 4 free games for the month of June: NBA 2K25, Destiny 2 The Final Shape, Bomb Rush Cyberpunk, and Alone in the Dark. All of these titles will be free and available to download from June 3rd to the 30th.
Quest accepted.
All right, we're back. Now, speaking of Nintendo, of course, we're very hyped for the Switch 2 coming out on the 5th, but there's been some rumors about the Zelda movie that's being made. I don't know if you heard about this, and if you're familiar with the actors. I know actors is not necessarily like my strong suit, might not be yours too, but I am aware of Hunter Schafer and her work in Euphoria, and there's just this one photo of her on a red carpet, and she looks exactly like Zelda.
Right.
And so, of course, now it sounds like they're in talks to have her cast as Zelda in the movie. What do you think about this?
I think it's great. I mean, I haven't been able to watch, full disclosure, Euphoria because I have a teenage daughter, and she's just entering her teenage years. I'm not ready for Euphoria because I've certainly
it's
heard
dark.
about but I've seen images of Hunter Schafer. I don't know if I've seen her in. I'm sure I have in something because I review movies and I talk about television programs and things like that too.
Right.
But she does look elfin. She looks like otherworldly, and she's modeled and worked for Prada and all kinds of stuff. And she's obviously got the chops if she's working alongside Zendaya, and Zendaya speaks so highly of her. And I think Zendaya is just an amazing talent, right? And I think that she's very committed to the projects that she's in, and she's got an eye for talent and appreciates good talent. So that endorsement speaks volumes to me. And I do think that the cast of Zelda has to look like they're from a different universe.
Yeah.
They have to look superhuman in a way, right? Or ultra human in a way, right?
Yes, which leads to what do we think for Link? Because I had to do some research. A lot of these sites, they do like fan casting and stuff like that. And the popular one is Tom Holland, but I'm less about that one. I think now I'm gearing towards just to go with an unknown.
Absolutely.
There are a couple actors like here and there. I don't know if you're familiar with Jack Champion. He kind of looks like Zelda, like his face, his eyes, the way that he looks. It looks like the cartoon character almost.
What was he in?
He played Spider in Avatar, in the most recent Avatar movie.
Okay. Yeah.
Voiced the character, I'd say. But yeah, he kind of looks the part. But besides that, there's just not a lot of other actors that I can think of who are known that would do this character justice. So I'm leaning towards unknown for that one.
Yeah, no, me too. And they have to be young because they kind of have to assume the mantle, and it has to be the chosen one. It's that story kind of thing. And and I don't know if amnesia is going to play a part in it. But they have to kind of look like they're not ready until they become ready. And so if you choose a it cannot be Tom Holland. I love that guy, but it cannot be somebody like I'm
too
still
well known.
Yeah, I'm still angry that he's Nathan Drake. I mean, that was ridiculous.
Right.
Miles Teller was right there. Like
I know.
I'm still not over that. So Hollywood's got to tread carefully. I mean, we're not happy, I think, many of us in the game community, that Chris Pratt played Mario, and that turned out okay.
It did.
Turned out
in
okay.
the end, it wasn't really, because it was just his voice. It's a little more easy to suspend disbelief at that point.
And Chris Pratt is very charming. He's very funny. He's just oversaturated, and
that's right.
Certainly like a person like Tom Holland would be as well.
I agree.
But again, I think they have to have that otherworldly face shape and maybe big eyes, and they have to kind of look accentuated,
Yes.
And you can do a lot with CG at this point as well. Look what Cameron and Robert Rodriguez did with Battle Angel Alita. You can do a lot of stuff with in post to make things look super hyper dynamic. That's honestly dangerous territory, making a live action Zelda. The expectations and the hopes and
so high,
and the movies we've all been playing in our minds for so long.
Yeah.
But they might pull it off, man. I mean, I love that Nintendo is super involved with all of this, and as Nintendo has grown into theme parks and concerts and music apps, and they're kind of playing outside of their comfort zone, but they're doing things, I think, quite well so far. Knock on wood, with their properties.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think it's in the end, it's going to be hopefully a movie that appeals to the kids, right? Because that's what a lot of these are for Nintendo properties. So I'm ready for that. But
also the lifer fans, which is, it's almost like Superman. There's a massive pressure on James Gunn and his team there to make Superman super, no pun intended, super successful and really hit. And it's because we all have these preconceived ideas of what the character should be, and there's been so many iterations of it. Not so much with Zelda in the movie form, but certainly all these stories that we've helped to define as being the player character and have consumed over decades playing the games. That's a tough, tall order. I think I have good vibes. I think it's Wes Ball who is directing it, and he directed the last Planet of the Apes film, and that was terrific. So, fingers crossed, and I have hope.
Yeah, me too. I have a lot of high expectations, but I have hope. I wanted to talk about quickly the Black Ops 6 news that there are microtransactions being advertised as you're playing the game. Basically, if you swap out a weapon, it will be advertised for you to potentially buy skin or some sort of weapon. And it's at the top. I looked up what this looks like, and it's at the top of the selection when you go to swap out a weapon in the game.
Right, of course it is.
How do we feel about this? It's definitely something that was not expected. It was not, obviously they snuckily put it in there. But I saw that and I was a little taken aback. I was wondering if you had any thoughts about it.
Well, these are businesses, and they are always looking at how to increase the bottom line, and I think it's gross. I mean, for me, it's gross. I don't buy stuff like that. I think that it's a different thing in a game like Fortnite where you buy a character and you can buy skins for your weapons and things like that. Cosmetics, I think, go down easier, but I do think that there is just such a determined drive in the video game industry to monetize at every angle. And it's exhausting a lot of players, quite rightly. But the only way that's going to change, I think, is if people stop buying stuff and really kind of protest and get out there on social media and talk to the channels that run these accounts and say, what are you doing? I think you're removing some of the purity, but I think it's a bit utopian to think. I mean, the genie's out of the bottle. There's just so much money that has been made from these microtransactions. I think that's part of the game for the game makers now, is how do we funnel more revenue? And it sucks. It's gross. These are public companies, but the only positive that comes out of that is if the coffers are full and the vaults are full of microtransaction money, then they might take a chance on something that is out of that space, maybe with the idea that if it becomes popular enough, they can insert microtransactions into that property down the road, which kind of sucks again. But Call of Duty is just it's a juggernaut, and it's it already makes these companies so much money that I can see it from both sides. I can say, we know that there's an expectation on the audience. They're gonna show up anyway, and some of them might want to buy their way to better performance. It's gross. Mm-hmm. And let's try it and see if it works. Let's see what the community has to say about it. The business is still in this weird, precarious state of financing these mega projects that go on for a long, long time, and then also keeping these teams employed while these projects are sustaining a captive audience for months and months and months after they're released, right? And the nuts and bolts and the dollars involved in all of this are just, it's kind of hard to fathom.
And it ties into just this overall thing that's happening in the space. It's, we even hear from the devs, they're also the ones that can afford to, or who are not those big juggernauts that are, costing $300 million a game.
Right.
Like Clair Obscur, Clair Obscur came out, their devs said that we hope that this game, the popularity of it, will help encourage people to buy more $40 to $50 games as opposed to the $70, $80 that we're seeing now. And it's not about oh my God, I'm bringing in all these stories because they're all kind of connected, but they are. What, Randy Pitchford said this past week about Borderlands, and saying that, if you're a fan and a big enough fan, you will find a way to spend the $80, right?
Yep.
So there's
very
constant
cynical
battle between, the consumer and the devs right now, I feel like, and the corporate side of gaming.
It shouldn't be a battle.
And they're all connected.
It shouldn't be a battle. It really shouldn't. And it does feel that way. It does feel like there's a lot of vitriol. There's a lot of anger. Some of it directed at publishers, some of it directed at developers. I wish there was a lot more civility and a lot more kind of understanding about this. I think maybe part of the problem is how protective and secretive companies are about the way that games are made and the challenges that game developers have to face. But I also think a lot of really mistimed poor bets on live service have really hurt the industry in some significant ways. But there is a lot of depth in this industry, and a lot of it's getting ignored, and a lot of studios closing down, and honestly, a lot of developers that are suited for other things being squished and forced into a way to build for microtransactions, which breaks my heart too, because I don't think a lot of people that dream of making video games dream of making weapons for Call of Duty. That's
right. It's the battle of art versus
commerce.
Business. It's same thing happening in Hollywood right now. But
big time.
I would say you're totally right, and there's still a lot of good out there. The fact that we have those games, those successes of the smaller games, just means that there's a demand for that. And hopefully the industry just naturally shifts towards it. And we do pay, we vote with our dollar, in a way. So it's whatever we put our money towards that kind of ends up being the new thing that people and companies are chasing. Well, thank you so much, Victor Lucas. I hope you have a great time covering Summer Games Fest. I know I will be so busy, and I know you will as well. So I wish you the best of luck.
This is the week we train for.
I know. This is the marathon. Yeah, we're off to the races.
Thanks for having me, Naomi. This was awesome.
Of course. Have a good rest of your week.
You too.
Victor Lucas is founder and host of the Electric Playground Network. You can follow him on Twitter at Victor_Lucas.
Flawless victory! Continue.
And that's This Week in Gaming. I'm your host, Naomi Kyle, and I had such a blast bringing you the news as always. Thank you so much for listening. Shout out to my co-writer, Josh Seaman. And don't forget to let me know what you were playing and what you think of these stories by tagging me at Naomi Kyle on social. From all of us here at This Week in Gaming, we wish you a gaming-filled week. We'll talk to you next week. Same time, same place. See you later.
This Week in Gaming is an iHeartRadio Canada podcast. Subscribe to this podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. Download the iHeartRadio app for more podcasts just like these.